question of the night: the best bike ever. And what I want to start this out by, I think you this is how I got you hooked here, because you definitely have one, and right away you started making sense. Can you guess what I'm gonna pick?
Well, I know you love that Husaberg 570. And
Okay, and in the chat, if you want to throw up your picks in the chat, I might rattle some of these things off over time. Conrad already just went YZ 125, and Conrad's a guy that needs some help rebuilding. He's one of the guys that has sent me information about rebuilding. He kept putting his YZ 125 back together, but he left the pieces from the old piston back in the bottom end.
nice.
It's a common mistake. It happens. But okay, so here we go. So you're thinking I'm going to go Husaberg 570.
Yeah, so it's possible. So this is what when you pitched me on this show the other day, you this is I didn't prep for any of the other questions. You just brought up this one as a potential question. And as soon as you asked me, I immediately answered. And that's why I kind of didn't want to
Right.
prep on any of the answers. I didn't want to be all jaded. But this is the one and I immediately thought of what I would say.
Yeah, no, and I right away I said that's a good one, but then you explained it and it got even better.
Well,
So go ahead. We're gonna do yours, and then if at some point your brain thinks you might know what mine is, it's gonna be now. Mark, you can't have three, okay? So go ahead, Jay. What's your bike?
So it's
And it can be a year range too, by the way.
it's the '05 to '08 Honda 450, and the '08 was obviously the best one. And the reason for that is I feel like from the '08 Honda 450 was kind of the best bike, and it would have won shootouts for probably a couple more years at least, as it was stock for '09, '10 in that range. The bike was kind of measured. Everybody measured the other bikes off of that bike. That bike was so good for that
For
period
sure.
of time. So from '05 to '08, even a little bit before that, but '05 to '08, that bike was amazing stock. The suspension's good. The durability was amazing. Honda and left, only had two oil compartments in that engine, and for that from the beginning of the Honda 450, and from '05 to '08, the durability was so good on all the stock components, the bikes could really be beat. And one of the reasons I stick with that this bike is because that's also the bike that the Honda 450X is, the '05 Honda 450X. There's a little bit of difference to an '06, but so from that bike to 17 is the same bike, that carbureted bike that's won all the Baja races and is just a standard for a lot of guys even today are still running that bike, like in Baja and many places. That bike is really good. It's really bulletproof. And I think because it has two oil compartments, that you don't have the clutch contaminants messing with the piston and valves and so forth. So that bike is
Right.
really durable. That 450X is just a standard. It's really good. You could, and I still like finding that. I fixed up a few over the last few years. If you find them for a good deal, they're still a great bike. And if you can find one of those with low hours, it's worth fixing up and having as a good bike, as your good desert bike, open. Obviously, it's not great on the tight trails, but as far as anything else, it's amazing. And so the Honda 450 for me was that bike, and in that generation, that time frame was just the best bike. And I think everybody chased that bike for a long time. And I think the Kawasaki 450 that was
That was the favorite bike for 5 or 6 years
yeah,
after '08.
was modeled a lot after the CRF
I
450.
totally agree.
Yeah, so it had that
Yeah.
same bulletproof feel, and that's why I think that the Honda 450 is that, because everybody kind of copied it, so to speak, to be with that. And I'm sure there's gonna be many great bikes coming out right now, and there's bikes that I like better. I like a KTM 350 with my 6500 kit, or spring conversions on it. That's one of my favorite bikes to ride. But as far as best bike all time, I would have to go with that Honda 450.
That's a I think that's a pretty unanimous slam dunk. That's a for every reason you said. When you brought in the whole X thing and how long the X lasted with that sort of
That
platform
yeah.
and stuff, and I remember those, and they were so from 5 to 6 to 7, that bike just getting that much better, just refining it at 8. And then when they went to the '09, and I was a really big fan of the '09 because the characteristics that Honda chose were things that I actually liked. I liked the way the fuel injection mellowed the motor out a certain amount and made it, for me, easier ride. But all the stuff that they changed, which if I liked it, that probably meant that most people didn't.
Right.
So it was a little bit. But I remember that you know that '08, that was such a, you know, a good bike. By the way, this segment brought to you by Yamaha. Yamaha makes the 2023 YZ450, which could be the bike of the century. You never know. I rode one and I overjumped the big road jump in Washougal, and I still lived. So it's pretty good. I hadn't ridden one until I went to Washougal, and Mike Ulrich, they had some bikes up there for the Alpine Stars Gear Intro, and man, that thing has a lot of power. It that's a lot of power. So everybody thinks I'm going to pick a Husaberg. That's why I'm drinking right now, so I can go off of I got to have a couple drinks just to settle my nerves here, because I'm really going to do my Husaberg love a little disservice here. But the Husaberg 570, which is what, you know, I used to talk about that bike forever and ever. But previous to that, there was the Husaberg 650, which was the old, you know, Swedish Husaberg. And I got one of those. Like, me and Ray Conway were sitting around talking about one. I actually went and bought a couple of them because I wanted to experience that motor again. Because, I mean, nothing makes power like that. Not even the new Yamaha. And if it wasn't for that bike making so much power, and then them making that KTM version of the 570, so taking the KTM motor, which, hey, guess what, Jay? 2 oil compartments, that thing that Honda did really well, and KTM just couldn't quite figure out. Well, the Husaberg guys looked at that and said, nah, that's not the way to do it. So they went back and turned the motor upside down, crooked, backwards, you know, however they did it in the 570. That was the first, quote, fuel-injected KTM, the Husaberg 570. And that's part of the project, how they allowed them to make this. They said, you develop our fuel injection. Nobody at KTM would even ride that Husaberg. It was like, that was look at that weird pile of crap. Like, why do we even care about this? And they were meanwhile working on that KTM 530, which is really a 2008 to 2010 mistake in the KTM lineage of the large displacement 4-stroke. But when that Husaberg started getting incredible reviews, and their baby 530 was getting tortured in the media, they actually went and finally wrote it and said, "Oh wow," and I heard some things like they were well on their way to the KTM 500, the new one, and that whole thing got scrapped because they're like, "Hey, everybody better ride and try this thing." So my bike is any year KTM 500 EXC. And it's that because if you had one bike that's so versatile that you could do almost anything on, it's the same platform as the KTM 450 SX. You got 50 cc's more, makes less horsepower, you know, has the wrong ECU in it. Has lights you can take off, but it's got the heart of a motocross bike. But then you can take this bike out and almost go do extreme enduro on it. It has this wide. You can turn it from a dual sport bike with some luggage and stuff and a big gas tank into an adventure bike, and you can strip it down and make it work on a motocross track. Yeah, it has PDS suspension, and people think that's junk too, but I don't. It'll get the job done. So I'm going with any year KTM 500 EXC, and there was a really good time around 2016 to 2018 where the emissions requirements weren't so strict, and there was still enough motorcycle there, you know, because they've made that bike lighter and lighter, and I think with some of that lightweight, it's not just 9 pounds lighter. There's 9 pounds less motorcycle. And I haven't seen the durability decline, but I worry a little bit about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you talked about that Honda being just rock solid durable.
Yeah.
And you're listening to two guys that have been around this industry for a long time, and we keep coming back to that durability. And even for guys that work on motorcycles all the time, we like durability, you know, something that's going to last, something that's built well. Something, you know, that has a track record. It's lasted for a few years. It wasn't like a one and done sort of a thing. So thanks to the Husaberg, We have we have a KTM 500 that I think that would be my my and if I don't know anything about you, say, hey, I want to get into dirt bikes and I want to ride, I just literally say KTM 500. I used to not even hesitate to give that answer. Now I hesitate a little bit because Yamaha is a big sponsor of the show, and I try to figure out what Yamaha would fit into your needs because I'm just a shill for all of my sponsors, as you are too, right, Jay?
Well, yeah, but there are Yamaha has a lot of companies like that have a lot of different offerings, and there are bikes. I wish Yamaha would make a 350, for instance, but they don't. But I think
Dude,
this is coming.
a 350, a 302 stroke,
Yeah,
and a dual sport bike.
a real dual sport. Yeah, not a street bike engine.
That's why I can say the KTM 500 because there's Yamaha doesn't even acknowledge that market exists.
Right.
They don't even make one. They're like we're not there. If they made one, it would be the best,
Right.
because it's Yamaha,
I
right?
think it would be really good. I can't argue with that.
Hey, the good thing, and this is what's cool about having them as a sponsor, is they know we tell it like it is. They say, hey, we want to support your show, and they do make really good bikes, and they you can't be sponsored by Yamaha and say the KTM is the best bike ever. But guess what? We had advertisers in the magazine that paid a lot more than sometimes the companies that won the shootouts. And I didn't care because my customer is not my advertiser. My customer is the person, the rider.
Right.
And that's I still feel that way today, and that's why I work with all the companies I work with, and I think you're the same way.
Yeah, and
if you liked what you saw in this video, come check us out over at dirtbiketest.com on the webs. We have bike tests, product tests, a lot of fresh dirt, and you can even support us by clicking through our links. Hopefully, we'll see you out in the trail.